Okay, it was an explosive report by the Globe and Mail that helped spark the national conversation on foreign election interference. And this led to a string of other media reports and eventually Mr. Johnston's investigation into these allegations. And in yesterday's report, he said some of the leaked materials had been misconstrued by the media, including to some degree a Globe and Mail report about a Chinese strategy to ensure a liberal minority in the 2021 election. Special Rapporteur David Johnston said in his report a very small number of Chinese diplomats expressed a preference for the Liberals, but he says there was no indication that China had a plan to orchestrate a liberal minority government. Well, Bob Fife is the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau Chief. Steve Chase is the Globe and Mail Senior Parliamentary Reporter. They're the guys on that story, and they're here in the studio with me now. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Okay.
Welcome.
Bob Fife, I'd like to start with that criticism of your February 14th story. It's a quibble or a criticism. How do you reconcile what David Johnston is saying with your reporting?
Look, what we reported were documents.
Right.
This is what CSIS was saying. In some cases, they were national security assessments, which are long documents, not a daily security briefing. So he says some diplomats felt this way. What diplomat? Well, the Consul General in Vancouver. The Communist Party's boss on the West Coast was the one who said that, quote, wanted the Liberal, Miss Tong, then the consul, wanted the Liberal Party to win the 2021 election, unquote. I didn't make that up. That's what the CSIS said.
No, I hope you don't take my question as suggesting that. Yeah.
No, and they go on to say that Ms. Tong and another consul officer made discreet and subtle efforts to encourage members of the Canadian-Chinese organizations to rally votes for the Liberals and defeat Conservative candidates. So those are what the document said. He's saying that, in his view, it was an orchestrated effort by the Chinese diplomatic corps to favor the Liberals. What he goes on to say, though, is that what China was more interested in was electing pro-China candidates and defeating people that they perceived to be anti-China. Well, as it turns out, the Conservative Party in the 2021 election wanted to ban Huawei and wanted to have a foreign agent registry, and those were the issues that they were getting hammered with within the Chinese-Canadian community, mainly the mainland Chinese-Canadian community, and on WeChat. So, we're really quite happy with our reporting, and if Mr. Johnston feels that it wasn't an orchestrated effort, the facts that what we see do not back up what he's saying.
Right, and look, certainly there's a lot of criticism about the media in the report, much of it really aimed at global news, and I'm not going to pile on. I mean, the Special Rapporteur said what he said about their reporting. But, Stephen, it is the reality. This is the challenge of reporting on intelligence, which we've talked about in the past, right? That you can't know everything. David Johnston says he's seen everything, when you've both acknowledged you can't and you haven't because of the way this is there. I mean, when you look at this, does it make you doubt your reporting in any way or reconsider some of the conclusions you drew earlier in your development of the story?
No, actually, it doesn't. In fact, Mr. Johnston met with us yesterday and congratulated us on our reporting. So that was the sort of verdict he gave to us. But no, we have got assessments that are not just one-offs. They're pictures that are painted. And we thought they're very reliable. And in fact, national security sources helped guide us in the interpretation of these reports. So we stand by them 100%.
What do you make of this choice, Bob, that David Johnston made to pick out a series of articles from Global News and the Globe and Mail and offer sort of a critique, a contextualization, and in some cases a flat-out rebuttal of them to make that choice in this report? What do you make of that tactic?
Well, I was more concerned about the fact that he was so willing to accept the Prime Minister's word and the word of cabinet ministers that they didn't know anything. Serious allegations were made about how China was interfering in Canadian politics, including the threats against Michael Chong. And he's happy enough to say, well, Prime Minister, did you know there was an orchestrated effort by China to help the Liberal Party? Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, okay, he didn't.
Is it possible that he didn't?
Well, that's why a public inquiry headed by a judge who has subpoena powers, has the right to cross-examine, can subpoena all documents and find out the truth, because something is seriously wrong with this system. If this information is going to the Privy Council office and nobody is going to the Prime Minister with it? I mean, that's a serious problem.
If I could follow up on that, one of the most interesting things in the report was on the matter of Michael Chong and the targeting of Michael Chong. Was another story we broke based on these documents.
And it corroborates your reporting in this
But
case.
what's interesting is that I found the reporting by Mr. Johnston quite limited. He said that a warning went to then Public Safety Minister Bill Blair's office and to his chief of staff, but they didn't read it. And that's not...
Well, they didn't get it, is actually what it says.
They didn't
have access to the top secret email, which is a puzzling thing to learn.
Which is the sort of thing I'd like to see a lot more information on than a couple paragraphs. We need a far more rigorous investigation of what went on there, because that is one of the most glaring examples in this report of how information is not getting to decision makers.
Underpinning a lot of your reporting, I think David Wamsley referred to this intelligence source who wrote the op-ed in your piece as the spine of your reporting, if I'm quoting your boss correctly. David Johnston says it's a matter of urgency that all efforts are made to identify and hold the leaker/leakers responsible because malice cannot be ruled out. You know this person, you know what their motivations is.
Well, I encourage everybody, I encourage
into
people to read the op-ed he put in the Globe. This is not a man or an individual who was had malice in them. He felt that the years and years of effort to look into the extent of Chinese interference, not only in Canadian politics, but in all aspects of Canadian society, have been ignored by the powers that be. And that's why this individual has come forward, although we have other sources as well.
Of course,
But what I have, Steve would agree with me, is a very honourable person who knows that he may be at risk of being caught and charged and go to jail.
It's an interesting debate happening though right now, right, Stephen? Like that people say David Johnston saying just trust us, and you can't trust him despite his resume and the work that he's done. The critics are saying this. You've got this source and other sources that you trust based on your assessment of their motivation. I mean, there are people looking at this saying, why shouldn't we believe David Johnston? Why should we believe the Globe and Mail?
Well,
reconcile that.
Our sources have spent more than 2 months studying this file.
Yeah.
This has been a crash course for a man who has no experience in counterintelligence or in national security, a crash course of 2 months, delving into a file, mostly talking to senior bureaucrats and asking them if they think they need a public inquiry is necessary. I think that the people that we're talking to, that we're relying on, that are helping us, have far more experience than 2 months in the file.
Do you think, Bob, your source is worried about being found? I mean, based on this, that a lot of national security experts we've had on say this person has to be found, and David Johnston making it clear in his report that
yeah,
this should be a
for
priority.
sure, of course, and other people who have helped us and other journalists are all at risk of being caught and charged and potentially going to jail.
Stephen, how do you think the public is going to look at the reporting on this, right? Because the criticism varies in different degrees, you know, in the report, but it's all sort of being lumped together as, you know, misconstrued by the media. Some of it is false. I mean, what do you think this does to the public's understanding and trust? Because that's coming back to that of the reporting.
I hope they go back and read the stories because our stories are exhaustively reported and carefully written, and I would invite them to go back. We wrote 14 stories on this topic. He only discussed 3 of them, but there's 14 stories, and they paint a picture of a process, of a system that's not working. And as Mr. Johnston himself said, if it weren't for these leaks, he wouldn't be writing this story.
In fact, I encourage the government to release the documents that we reported on. You know, put it out. Let people make a judgment call.
Do you think the average person can do that? Like, I'm not saying they shouldn't.
Oh, they are.
I mean, transparency is transparency.
Yeah, no, honestly, they can. I mean, these are often, they read almost like they're more in depth, but, you know, the CSIS annual report where they make issue warnings and whatnot. Well, it's obviously more in depth than that, so they might not be able to, they might have to take some stuff out, but there's no reason in the world why the CSIS cannot be far more forthcoming with the kind of information that we've reported. Transparency and sunlight is the best way to counter these kind of interference and intimidation tactics that China has been doing for quite a number of years.
Okay, Stephen, just final point.
Oh, one of the common themes we hear from people who've worked in national security is that CSIS is Canada's secret reporting service. It does all its reporting in secret, and no one reads it, and no one pays attention, and no one acts.
No, certainly, and look, I keep mentioning page 18 and 19, I think it is, in this report, where they explain the binders just going into the government departments and nobody knows where it goes, and the inability to get access. I mean, there's clearly a structural problem on how it happens internally, so we'll see where that goes. But gang, I want to thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Robert Fife and Steven Chase of the Globe and Mail.
Great to be here.